So thank you very much, Christine. It's a pleasure always to listen and to learn from you. Christine Gadra is an eminent specialist of the spatial and ethnographic ethnic representations of people from Asia in the Middle Ages. So she's a specialist of Marco Polo and of Jordan of Séverac. So she presented here personal research and text for which she published translations. So I'm always learning from her, and I'm happy to comment a little bit on what she told us. I think I will insist on 2 points. The first would be that I appreciate that you did not speak about ethnography and ethnography in antiquity in the Middle Ages, because as you all know, ethnography is a modern type of research. The word ethnography itself, it's modern, and unlike geography, which is a Greek word. And I think we cannot properly speak of ethnography before the 18th century. So we need a method and a systematic research in order to have ethnography, and also something like a scientific purpose. So before German explorations in Siberia and French exploration in North America, I would not speak about ethnography, but about representations of spaces and people. So descriptions, representations by image and so, but not clearly ethnography. So I appreciated this. So this is why I would start my very short presentation answer with this question: is the barbarian in antiquity and the Middle Ages a matter of appearance? So do we judge barbarians only by what we see from the exterior, what the travelers and the missionaries in your case were telling, without really having a precise plan, like a sociologist or an ethnographer today who must answer some clear questions from a specific methodology he chose consciently? So what does it mean? It's just an impression. And I will just mention the picture you saw on the poster of our presentations that we pick up with the help of the Institute of Advanced Studies together with Huang, because it's a little bit surprising. So maybe you know that it represents Shapur and Valerian, but it's the illustration of Ferdovi Shahmana, about which Franz Grenet spoke today. So this is the Persian Book of Kings, which was composed at the end of the 10th century, and which has a very rich and diverse tradition of illustrations. Of course, the story of the Romans, as Franz Grenet said, does not occupy an important part in that. But we still have in some tradition this curious representation where the Roman emperor is the one who will become the slave of the barbarian, because Valerian, as you know, Omar Coloru just published a book about l'imperatore prigioniero, finished his life as a prisoner of the Persian king. So here we can see the barbarians represented differently, and you are more familiar maybe with this relief from Naqsh-e-Rustam, which is the relief of Shapur, in which he presents himself as the master of the Roman emperor. So this would be the model of the illustration of the manuscript, which is contemporary, so 3rd century. We have in Paris this Camée of the 4th century with the same representation, so the great king submitting the king of the Romans. All this is, of course, in the Roman fashion, but we can see also the Roman and the Western interpretation of what the Orientals try to say through these images. And this is a manuscript also from Paris, from Boccaccio, who reinterprets the submission of the Roman emperor to the Persians by the fact that Valerian was a pagan, so he was not a Christian, and this is what happened to him. So we can see here the Roman emperor, and here Shapur in this medieval manuscript from Boccaccio. Why all this? So we are in already in a Persian tradition, which has other parallels also for another relief of Shapur that you can see here with Gordian III, who probably died in battle. In any case, this is what the Iranians said, that he died in battle against Shapur. So this tradition of submission, which made the communication of power in the Iranian context of Shapur, of course, has Roman models. All this is taken, it's a Kulturtransfer between two civilizations which are normally in war, and it was taken from the Roman imperial triumphal art representation. So, and we have about the same time with this image in the Persian context, we have the Byzantine representation of Heraclius, who defeated Khosroes II, so 12th century AD. So I just wanted to underline this matter of image, so in that in this report, where each one is the barbarian of the other, one still copies the other, even in the representation of otherness, of the barbarian character. So I agree with you for these descriptions and for focusing as researchers, as we are, on the methodology, let's say, of the means the ancient and medieval travelers have to look at the aspect and of the behavior of the barbarians. The second point, which we underlined answering to Jean-Charles Dussène, it's a very interesting question, why the barbarian lack, why don't have the barbarians at the end of the Middle Ages, and is this because of a Christian or for religious Islamic ideology? I totally agree with you, and I think it's a very brilliant presentation. I think we have a little bit this situation illustrated through the history of cartography in medieval times, starting with this the Mappa Mundi of Albi in the 8th century AD, which is one of the oldest Mappa Mundi preserved, directly preserved to our times, and whose model, I think, goes back to the 5th century AD to Eucherius of Lyon. It's the time of Paulus Orosius and of these Christianizations, let's say, Interpretatio Christiana of the geographical tradition of the pagans. And we can see here a world which never existed, so through the Mediterranean entering and the Europe here, Asia here, and Libya, Africa here, with some parallelism reminding the Eratosthenic tradition of geography and the islands of the Mediterranean and so on. So this is a world. What does this map wants to say? This wants to represent the world, the Roman world, the Roman Orbis Terrarum, which is totally dominated by the Romans, as it was never was, in fact, in the moment of the birth of Jesus Christ. So this is served as a school book for the monks in the monasterium in the early Middle Ages. But what happened after? So if we go from the end of antiquity with this kind of maps illustrating Cosmas Indicopleustes, which was a geographer of the 6th century AD from Alexandria, or this kind of maps of Beatus of Liebana, so who goes on the same patterns of the 5th century AD to early Middle Ages. This we have this the ancient tradition. So, and what happens until the 12th, 13th century when we have the big Mappa Mundi? It's a big transformation. It's a big gap. So in the 13th century, we see these big maps on which all the knowledge about the world is condensed. It's a big compilation, not only of facts, but also, let's say, of something like Platonic idea of the world, because we have here the image of the Cosmocrator. Okay, it's not really working, and we have something like a correspondence between representation of space and time, the end of time to the west with the apocalypse and beginning of the creation here with the earthly paradise, and Jesus, the Cosmocrator, going all over, mastering all of this world. Why I'm showing you this? Because this map has also its barbarians, and these barbarians, and with this I go again in the continuation of Franz Grenet this morning, became demons or monsters. And I want just briefly to evoke why, maybe another answer, why we don't have barbarians at the end of the Middle Ages or in the Middle Ages. It's because they became something which did not exist in antiquity, but they become, in this case, Gog and Magog. So transposition, let's say, of real people into biblical models, into mythical people. And this myth of Gog and Magog starts from the Bible, from the Genesis and Ezekiel. It's about the Gog and the people of Magog who threaten Israel, and which is transposed and reinterpreted in a Revelation, so in the Apocalypse, as the people which will be at the origin of the end of the world. In the late antiquity, imperial time and late antiquity, these people are put behind Alexander Gates. There are several locations for these Alexander Gates between the Caucasus, the Caspian, and behind the Caspian Sea. And they will come in order to put an end to the civilization. Who are these Gog and Magog? I think they are the old barbarians. I mean, the barbarians of the ancient world are transposed in these demons for the Oriental people, or this let's say, mythical threat for the West. So they are Scythians, and these are the oldest interpretations for Flavius Josephus, for example. They are Goths a little bit later, so in the end, by the late antiquity. They are also Huns, with Ephraim the Syrian in particular, and Hieronymus, so 5th century, and Isidorus of Sevilla, who has several interpretations. They can be Turks, so in the 8th century AD with Aeticus Ister. They are Hungarians, of course, in the Middle Ages, with Remy d'Auxerre, for example. They are Tartars, so depending on the major threat on the West, the Gog and Magog correspond to different people, or even the Jews with medieval anti-Semitism. And Gog and Magog, Greg can tell us more about it. They are also the patrons, isn't it, of the city of London through a different and more complicated modern history. So I would just finish by saying that indeed there are periods in history where the barbarians are integrated into the world, let's say, into the universe, the ethnic descriptions of the world. And I'm finishing just with the nice phrase of Kavafis. So what happens when we don't have barbarians anymore? Iantropiaftitan kapialisis. Thank you. So if there are no precise questions or so, we can pass to the, or do you want to answer, Christine? No. Yes.
Pour une ignorance, comment traduiriez-vous
Une certaine solution. Kitora genum horis barbaros. What we'll do without the barbarians? Yeah, you are right. From the philosophical point of view, it's all the question. Kind of I don't know, a solution. Yeah. Capoeira, it's yeah, something like a solution.
Anca, on the map of Mundi in Hereford Cathedral, at one corner there's a great wall marked out at one end, and it's labelled, "This is the wall that Alexander the Great built to keep Gog and Magog away." And, yeah, we think this is the wall of China, which gave the barbarians on the wrong side of the river.
Yeah, in fact, maybe for the Christine can correct me. May correct me for this. Maybe the reference there was to Derbent or to the walls north of Tehran. So the Chinese wall, it's more modern than the sources, the geographical sources of the Hereford Mappa Mundi. So this Mappa Mundi, even if they are from the 13th century, they use late antique models just like the Mappa Mundi of the early Middle Ages. And indeed, the texts mentioned so the Gog and Magog are behind the Alexander Gates. This can be Caucasian gates. So taken from Pompey expedition into Pontus. This can be, and there is a confusion in Pliny, who already mentions the problem because there was a problem of propaganda in the time of Nero and so on. There are some straight, narrow passage, so in the south of Caspian and to the southeast of Caspian. So we have at least 3 locations, and they are compiled in Ptolemy's geography. So with this knowledge of geography of pagan times, we have the making of the tradition in late antiquity, which puts together Gog and Magog from Alexander's novel, so the Callisthenes already, with the different gates of Alexander. Yeah, thank you.
This is fascinating. Just one thought. I think in the Byzantine side of the Middle Ages, you do have continued references to barbarians, primarily because they tend to reproduce older documents. So the Procopius histories become the source for a variety of kinds of essays, including gymnasmata, these student essays. And from time to time, you get reconstructions where I'm pretty sure the word barbaroi occurs. It's much less common in the West than I think it is in the surviving core. And they're surrounded by enemies and engaged in continual wars. What would be interesting to know is the extent to which they call the Western Christians barbarians, who did a lot more damage in some ways than the Muslims who surrounded them. But yeah. Oh, there you go. So there's so maybe on the Middle Ages one should draw 2 lines of thought: the West and the East.
You are totally right, David. This is the problem of Byzantine representation. So we have Scythians until the end of the Byzantine Empire. So they just follow the patterns of the ancient descriptions. This is why it's just like in the case of Gog and Magog in the Eastern and the Western tradition, it's difficult to understand what is behind Scythians, because all the people coming more or less from the north are Scythians for all the Byzantines. So this goes to Anna Komnena and also much later, until more or less until the end of the Byzantine Empire. Personally, I did not find references to the Westerners in terms of barbarians, but Christine may answer.
Has an example.
I was just referring to Anna Komnena's history, and there she refers to the Normans as the barbarians. But that's in a different context probably. But